For as long as humanity has had sentience, we have stared up at the night sky and into the vastness of space and wondered what was out there. Were there other beings like us, looking up into the same sky and pondering the same question? Across eons we've always wondered, are we alone? Cases that date back to the medieval and even the ancient times are sometimes preserved for us to view in art or in paper. Pictures of flying saucers, strange cigar-shaped crafts, and even glowing lights in the sky have captivated the minds of humans since the dawn of time. Are they like us? Are they peaceful? And most of all, are they real? The following stories are accounts of encounters with beings, possibly from another world. Are they real? You will decide. This first story is from Topolovka in Russia, from June to July of 1966. A Moscow geologist named Oleg Ivanovich was taking part in a geological excursion, and along with others in the group they were trudging through a thick forest northwest of Topolovka. One night, one of the horses ran into trouble and became badly stuck in the swamp, and they decided to camp out for the night. During the night, they were awakened by a deafening noise emanating from the sky. Ivanovich bolted out of his tent and soon found that, all around them, the forest had been set ablaze, and fire was everywhere. The trees were burning, the heat became too intense to bear, and they all jumped into the river to escape it. It said the next morning that pockets of the forest were still burning and smoldering. The men had set out to see where the explosion appeared to have been. Then, bizarre things began to occur. The compass they had started spinning out of control. The radio would not work properly and was essentially useless, and they began to feel a sensation of powerlessness come over them. The trees were seemingly all bent over in one direction, and their tops were lopped off as if cut by a gigantic knife. Approaching cautiously over the very swampy terrain, they saw the wide outline of a burnt object. It appeared to look almost like two wash basins that were set face to face, with flashing lights around the central part. They could see a small door from which dense, black smoke was pouring from, and emerging from the dark interior, through the door, they saw some sort of tentacle sticking out. Owing to the swampy soil, they could go no further. They could only stand and watch from about 25 meters away. They began to take photographs, but none of them came out very well. It is suspected that this is due to the radioactivity of the area, like after the crash that is, because even during that brief period they all felt overcome by vertigo and nausea. Ivanovich's eyesight was also impaired somehow, and they decided that it was safer to retreat to a safer distance. But by then it was getting dark, and they heard the sounds of approaching helicopters. The witnesses counted over 5 helicopters heading to the site where the crashed UFO was laying. They thought about going back to the scene, but it was getting darker and their compasses no longer worked. So the next morning around 10 a.m., they returned to the location, and there was nothing. There wasn't even a scrap of metal, nor a burnt object left. They did, however, find human footprints in the swampy soil and marks that were left by helicopters. Later, other eyewitnesses surfaced. Anna Igorovna had been awakened in the middle of the night by a roar and found the walls of her house shaking. In a state of being half asleep and half awake, she looked outside and found that the sky was lit up just as if it were daytime. The ground began to shake, and she saw a great glowing light descend towards the forest, a light described as being as bright as the sun. It made her eyes sore and affected her eyesight. The thing fell somewhere in the forest, and she felt a powerful blast of wind, and then everything went dark. All that remained was a great glow off in the distance. Another witness, Michael Kuzmich, a 79-year-old hunter, had been fishing in the area late at night, and suddenly he heard a tremendous noise, a sort of howling. Then the sky lit up as though it were on fire. He ran seeking shelter, and there came an explosion, and he was struck by a tremendous blast of air. The tops of the trees caught fire and crackled as the flames leapt up. He thought that the Chinese had launched a nuclear missile. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard that story before, but I still liked it because it's one of those ones that's from like the Soviet days, the Cold War days, when everything was so secretive and so, classified. But one thing that I do like about these stories from Soviet Russia is that, but since before the Soviets were very, very secretive about these things, and since the Iron Curtain fell, everything's been ever so slowly leaking out. And sometimes you get really cool stories like this, or really freaky depending on how you look at it. Anyways, I thought it was interesting, and I hope you did too. The second story is from my country of Canada, and occurred in November of 1930, and this was in rural Nunavut, which is a northern territory in Canada. In case you're wondering, the northern territories are Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon. And I have a story for another video for one from the Yukon that I found pretty interesting too. I actually found it like over 10 years ago when I was doing like a school project on the territory. So I'll put that in a different video. But this one is from the Anjikuni Lake in the Kavalik region in rural Nunavut. So the Anjikuni Lake is nestled along the Kazan River, and if I recall, it is a popular spot for trout and pike fishing, or at least at the time it was, because it was very plentiful there in the area. And the colony that was there quickly grew in size because of this, and so like a lot more people started settling there, and it became famous almost overnight for this experience that happened. Joe LaBelle was a Canadian fur trapper, and he was very experienced with it. He was a more than capable outdoorsman, and he was well known in the area, and he knew that the Inuit had formed a community there, and sometimes he would go through and stay the night while trading and all this other stuff. So it's not like he was just a stranger that came to this place and, these weird things happened. He had known the area before. And it says he was familiar with the Inuit tales of wood spirits and other allegedly malicious beings that were living in the remote part of Canada. It's also interesting to note that this area has a lot of stories about the Wendigo, which I've done a previous video on, and if you like that stuff, then you can check out that video. And so like I said, that even despite this, the tribe was very friendly. They'd have no problem offering you a bed, and, they would always welcome passing travelers. They were just, seemed to be good people. However, one night, LaBelle had approached the village, and he was strangely gripped by fear and anxiety. This particular night proved to be different from all the rest that he had ever been there. The full moon overhead cast a eerie illumination across the village, and he noticed that nothing was moving. There was usually an army of huskies that were normally boisterous with the arrival of visitors, and all he could hear was silence. In fact, the only sound that he could hear, sounds of his own snowshoes, and the hollow echo of his greeting to the people. He immediately knew that something was very wrong and something was amiss. Once he approached, he began to investigate the village. All signs of life were completely absent from the entire village. There was no laughter, no conversation. Even the total lack of smoke emanating from the chimneys that indicated any presence of life. All he found was a lone fire that had been started off in the distance, and he made his way toward it. But the fire looked like it had been burning for quite a while, and on closer inspection, he discovered that someone had begun the preparations for a meal, but it's as if they never finished, and the stew was ruined. He still searched, hopeful that he might bump into somebody that can explain what happened. Becoming a little frantic, Joe began to physically examine the homes of the tribe to determine if there was a hint or a clue as to what might have caused them to up and leave or disappear, and unfortunately, he found nothing. In fact, when he searched the houses, what he found were homes well stocked with food and weapons, and in one location he found another badly burned meal, and in another he found a discarded repair of a junior sealskin that had yet to be completed. He got thinking that it must have been a very sudden event for all 30 people in the village to just up and disappear just like that. There were no signs of a struggle, and in fact, all food, weapons, and even clothing had all been just abandoned. In fact, upon looking around, he found no tracks outside of his own, not even the dogs. So when he looked for them, he found them and noticed that they had all starved to death. All of this and more was more than enough for him to continue onwards to the closest telegraph office, located several miles further on. For now, he would have to forego your basic necessities like food and shelter, but he was eager to leave the eerie village and retrieve help. Once at the telegraph office, he reported his encounter, and he insisted that the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, launch an official investigation. En route to the village, the RCMP noticed an isolated shack that belonged to another trapper called Armand Laurent and his 2 sons. When questioned, they claimed to have seen a large cylindrical object that transformed into a bullet shape before heading toward the Anjikuni Lake. Unconfirmed reports also claimed that when the RCMP had actually reached the village, they found that every single grave in the burial ground that had been opened and emptied, the headstones neatly stacked in piles on either side of the graves, ruling out animals as the culprits. An intense and thorough investigation followed, but they could not produce one credible reason as to what happened. In fact, it is said that the tribe and colony had been missing for 8 weeks prior to the Bell's arrival. But then this begs a few questions. If the village had been stocked with food, how had the dogs starved to death? And if the village had been abandoned for 8 weeks, why was the fire smoldering? I always like stories like this too, because they're really eerie and really creepy, and it kind of reminds me of the Roanoke colony in the US, where, they just up and disappeared. I think this is one of those things that we'll just never get a proper explanation as to what happened, although I included in the video because of the strange sighting of the cylindrical object that turned into a bullet, and that definitely sounds like a UFO to me. Something else that's worth noting too, it's not really related to the UFO phenomenon, but up here we have legends of the Northern Lights taking people. And if you guys find that interesting, then I'll try to find some stories about that and I'll do those videos, because I want to do like a little bit of everything with this channel. In fact, it's not mentioned in the updated source that I had this story from, but I'm quite sure that the Northern Lights were very strong during that period of time. I'm not sure if that has any correlation or not. I just thought it was worth noting. It might seem as a cop-out for this video, but for the last story, I'm going to tell one that's from my area. And by area, I mean where I live, plus about 30 minutes in all directions. So where I live, a big industry here is forestry. And so that means that in the woods, along trails and stuff, there's going to be pockets where there's just like nothing at all. No trees, no grass, just tilled up rocks and sand and stuff. So this story, there were 6 people present. They were all on a 4-wheeler run, and it was kind of in the evening in the summertime. And they had gone off the trail into this clearing because they were going to stop and talk and eat and stuff, things you do on a 4-wheeler run, especially in the summertime. So they're just chatting away, having a good time, eating and stuff. And then they hear this kind of a humming noise, or like a warbling kind of noise. And they look over, And there's like a hill that's all grass in this area because it, I assume, used to be a farmer's field, because that used to be a big thing around here too. And they see this disc come down from the sky and come, like, I think they said 4 to 5 feet off the ground. It just sped through, did a huge dip to about that height off the ground, and then shot across the ground, up the hill, and then took off, and then just disappeared into the sky. And I think they said that the disc was about 15-20 feet wide. But the thing that I noticed was the amount of heat that came off of it. It was like when you open the door on an oven and you can feel the heat kind of radiating out at you. They said it was like that, but a lot more intense. And like they were all now sweaty and probably had done something in their pants from seeing this. And I never saw if they could like see anybody inside of it or anything. They also didn't mention if it had any flashing lights, but they said it was a dark gray color. And it, like I said, came like real close to the ground, then just hit that little hill and then flew off. So I thought that was like, a nice way to end the video from like a local experience kind of thing. If you like this video, then I can do another one. This video was actually an idea in one of the comments of a different video. So if you like these videos, then please like and subscribe, and everybody can watch it and stuff. It's cool. It's cool to see how many views some of these videos are getting, because I never anticipated this at all. And if you guys have suggestions for a video, then you can put them in the comments. I know that you guys like the missing 411 videos, and they do get the most views, but I'm not only going to do those videos because I have a whole host of things I want to do with this channel. I want to do these videos, the Bigfoot ones, Wendigo ones, like mysterious creatures from around the world, ghost stories. I want to do everything because I just love all of it. So stay tuned in the coming, I guess, days, weeks, and months, and I'll do all kinds of videos. Hopefully you like them, and thank you for watching.